Be talking about now, why is communism bad? Communism, which is the topic of this video, and communism is quite an intriguing philosophy. It is like an economic system and philosophy devised by Karl Marx and a lot of the Bolsheviks in like Russia in the early 18th, 19th centuries. Communism, the redistribution of wealth, living in a classless society, the state owns all of the resources. Communism is like at the heart. No, fam. Oh no, fam. I'm suffering from poverty, man. I'm suffering so much. Everything's going upside down. Oh no, fam. Everything's going upside down. I'm suffering so much. Oh no, I'm suffering, fam. I have all these issues, all these problems, and I've got all these economic stagnations, and I'm suffering in all sorts of different ways, and I just don't understand. Karl Marx promised that I would be earning lots and lots of money, but I'm just like becoming poorer and more impoverished, and I really just don't understand. And oh man, everything's just turning upside down, and I just really don't understand. I was promised tremendous amounts of wealth by Karl Marx, but the communists, they told me that I'll be rich, and oh, I'm suffering, and they took all my wives and children. It was at the heart of like the Soviet Union and like a lot of like other communist areas and regimes, even in China. And communism, to put it in a very basic way, to explain communism, is basically about living in a classless society, like a society that has no like rigid social hierarchies. There's no poor, there's no rich people, everyone's on the same level. And I think originally and initially, if you look at the Soviet Union at the beginning, I think that's why communism like kind of spread like wildfire. Because imagine like there's no poor, there's no rich, everyone's just on the same level. That sounds so amazing. And like communism on paper sounds so amazing that, bro, there's no more like so rigid social hierarchies, everyone's equal. Why wouldn't you want to live in that sort of society or world? Like, why wouldn't you want to be in like that type of situation where there's no more like rigid social hierarchies, everything's on the same level, we're all equal in the face of any sort of like legal authority, in the face of like the world of economics, everything and everyone is equal. We're all equally provided for. We all have the same level of wealth. That sounds superb. But if you look at the Soviet Union, in the later stages of its like history, the Soviet Union had like, there's a lot of famines, atrocities, human rights abuses, massacres. The Soviet Union, and like as well as China, and there's so many other sorts of like places as well in the world that were once communist, and they were suffering from it tremendously. And like if you look at Venezuela, there's like a lot of different like parts of this globe where places that were communist, they suffer from like a lot of economic poverty now and stagnation and like political turmoil. But anyways, why doesn't communism work? I'm suffering so much. The bourgeoisie, all these sorts of bad things and people. I have all these issues and I'm suffering so much, and I just don't understand why. And the redistribution of wealth. And if everyone's equal, why am I suffering? Why is there so much poverty? Oh, I'm suffering in all sorts of ways. And it's really tremendously hard. Why am I suffering so much if everyone is equal? Oh man, I'm suffering so much. Suffering. Oh, I'm so poor and helpless. I'm suffering, man. I'm suffering so much, man. From economic poverty, hardships. It's impossible to get anywhere. It's over, man, it's over. And why is communism bad? I had to just double check my notes here. Why communism is bad? First of all, one of the biggest issues with communism is like economic stagnation. In a communist regime, it's impossible for any individual to become industrious. Like if you're an individual in a communist regime like the Soviet Union, being industrious is nearly like, you're not able to like become successful, you're not able to build up your own wealth. It's impossible to be an entrepreneur. And that's why, why is communism bad? Because it creates economic stagnation. Individuals aren't incentivized to be industrious. If you look at what happened in the communist like Russia, Soviet Union, the people in that sort of like situation, the people in the communist like regime in Russia and the Soviet Union, they suffered from like so many different sorts of hardships. They were suffering from like famines, poverty, despite the communist regime owning all of like the wealth of the society and redistributing it equally among the masses, but still people were suffering from like all these like economic hardships and famines and turmoil. The reason why is because in order for a communist society to emerge, the regime, like the communists at the top of the society, they have to own, like the government has to own the means of everyone's economic production and activities. The individual can't amass wealth. It's impossible for you. If you're in a communist regime, you can't build up your own wealth because like it goes against the principles of communism because of like the redistribution of wealth, living in a classless society. You can't, like, there can't be winners, there can't be losers. Everyone has to be on the same level. And that's why communism doesn't really work. It creates an economic flat line. Let's say you're someone that's like very into hardships, poverty, I'm suffering so much. I just don't understand why I'm in such a dire state of mind. And I'm suffering. God damn, bro, I'm suffering so much. And I just don't understand why I'm suffering so much. But I'm suffering, man. And oh no, the communists took all my wealth and money and I'm just suffering tremendously and I just don't know. I just don't know anymore. I'm suffering, man. You're innovating, you're building new technologies, you're able to build up lots of wealth. But in a communist society, even if you build up like lots of like success and wealth, the communists will just redistribute it to everyone else. You'll be forced back down and everyone's like trapped under like an economic flat line. And that's why is communism bad? It creates like an economic flat line. It prevents individuals from amassing wealth. It prevents people from becoming successful, bro. In a communist society, you can't be a loser. Because the communist government's going to redistribute wealth to everyone, so you can't be a loser. But you also can't be a winner because the communist society government, they're going to take away all your wealth. Even if you're like successful, you build up lots of wealth. You can't become successful because there's no class in a communist society. Everyone's equally provided for. So it's like there can't be winners, there can't be losers, but there also can't be winners. And that's why communism kind of like backfires. It fails tremendously because of this like issue of like a classless society, no rigid social hierarchies. The means of production's owned by the government, the communist regime. If you look at the Soviet Union, Russia, what happened there was that the Soviets, the Bolsheviks, they owned every aspect of like Russia, like the Russian society, the economic side of things. They owned the means of production, and the individual person in Russia and the Soviet Union, he wasn't able to build his own wealth. He was trapped under an economic flat line. Why is communism bad? Communism is bad because it creates an economic flat line. You can't be a winner. You can't be a loser, but you also can't be a winner. It's like everyone's trapped under an economic flat line because even if you become successful, you build up lots of wealth, what's going to happen is, since like redistribution of wealth, like the communist government owns everything, so regardless of anything that you do, your like economic activities will be subsidized and you won't be able to build. I'm suffering and I'm suffering and I'm suffering and I'm suffering so much, man. It's impossible. And I just keep suffering more and more and more. And I just don't understand why. The communist government, they promised me tremendous amounts of wealth. I'm suffering and I'm poor. have poverty issues, and I just don't understand why. I'm suffering. It's all sorts of cruelties. Suffering so much. But I just don't understand why. I'm suffering so much. I'm suffering. Poverty and dying. Build wealth, bro. It's impossible. If you're in a communist regime, it's impossible to build any level of like wealth as an individual person. You're going to be suffering from so much like stagnation, economic stagnation, which is what happened in like Soviet Union, Russia, which is what happened in China as well. There's like lots of, isn't that kind of paradoxical? Because communism is like seen as like a very utopian like belief system, that which is why it was like so predominant, like which is why it spread in the first place, because of like this like belief, like this false belief in like in a classless society without any rigid social structures. It's a utopian belief, like, oh, no more, like everyone has the same amount of money in the bank account, so like the government provides for everyone equally, no winners, no losers, everyone. It sounds so good on paper, but the reason this doesn't execute well in reality is because it creates like this economic flat line. You can't be a loser, but you also can't be a winner. Everyone's stuck on the same level, and that's why there were famines and stuff like that, because I think it just created like this like economic stagnation. Like it literally just, the communist regimes like Russia, China, they ruined their own like economies because individuals couldn't build wealth. Everyone was just getting the same amount of wealth anyway, money, and so why be industrious? Because your wealth is just going to get stolen by the regime and given to like the common person. Everyone gets the same amount at the end of the day, so why even work? Like, that's why the communist government societies in the past, they all collapsed, because communism, like, it creates an economic flat line. You can't be a winner and you can't be a loser. Everyone's stuck on the same level. But again, why is communism bad? It creates an economic flat line. It creates economic stagnation. Communism also robs the individual of its like own like ownership of like wealth and money. Like, why even be like a farmer? Why even commit to any sort of job when you're in a communist regime? Because you're not going to be able to earn anything on your own. You're not going to be able to amass your own wealth. The government owns everything, and that's why, you know, look at Soviet Union, Russia. It was quite a suffering, and I'm suffering so much from poverty. I just don't understand why. And I just don't really understand why I'm so in like such a dire state in mind. And it's all sorts of like hardships, cruelties, and I just don't understand. And Karl Marx said I'll be making the big bucks. Karl Marx said I'll be making the big bucks. And I'm getting poorer and poorer and poorer, and I just don't understand why. Karl Marx said I'll be making the big bucks. I'm getting poorer and poorer and poorer. Karl Marx said I'll be making the big bucks. Tragedy, what happened in Soviet Union, Russia, like a lot of famines, a lot of dark stuff happened. I don't want to get too deep. Why is communism bad? In essence, communism is bad because it creates an economic flat line, and it robs the individual of his like hard-earned cash and money in it. And everyone in a communist society is forced into the same socioeconomic positions, and the individual isn't able to build his own wealth. The individual is like robbed of his own like industrious nature. The individual stagnates perpetually. Again, Soviet Union, Russia, and if you look at China as well, isn't it paradoxical that these places became so inhospitable? So many famines, people dying in like literally like millions of people were like perishing in like gulags, like camps that the Soviets built. Like there was like people that were like dying in famines, bro. Like it was very dark stuff. And I believe, if you look at, like, again, the history of Russia, the history of China and Venezuela, a lot of South America, communism was very dominant there. You got Che Guevara and stuff. I don't want to get too deep. Communism doesn't work, bro, because it creates an economic flat line. Like, no more social structure, no more rigid social hierarchies. There's no winners or losers. Everyone's stuck on the same boat. That just doesn't work, bro. Suffering, and I'm suffering so much from, like, poverty and other related issues, and it's so hard. I'm suffering so much. Karl Marx promised I'll be making billions. I'll be making riches upon riches, but I'm still suffering so much. And it doesn't even make any sense. And I'm suffering poverty, from hardships, from cruelties. I just don't understand why. Because Karl Marx promised I'll be making millions upon millions of big bucks, and I'll be getting richiness and being a rich person with lots of material wealth. But I just don't understand why I'm so poor. And why I'm, like, in this such dire state of mind and condition. And Karl Marx promised me all the big toys and money and wealth that I could ever imagine. Oh, why?